Welcome to Multifamily Insights. I'm your host, John Casman, and I want to thank you for joining us for another great episode. If you're enjoying the show, do me a quick little favor. Leave us a rating and review. I want to hear your honest feedback on what the show is doing for you, or any tips or insights and feedback to help it work harder for your investing goals. And if you haven't done so already, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. We've got a great show today. We're going to be talking to James Nelson. Highly acclaimed investment sales broker James Nelson is the principal and head of Avison Young's Tri-State Investment Sales Group in New York City. Now, he has a 25-year career. He's sold more than 500 properties and loans totaling over $5 billion. On top of that, he's also an investor, and he's launched 2 real estate funds with total capitalizations north of over $350 million. Now, he is the host of the Insider's Edge to Real Estate Investing podcast and the author of the Insider's Edge to Real Estate Investing book. Let's welcome to the show, James Nelson.
John, thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to come on your show. I love what you've been doing, and it's always fun when I'm on with a fellow podcaster. So I have a lot of appreciation for what you do, and I know we share the same desire to give actionable steps for our listeners. So really excited to have a great conversation with you today.
Absolutely. Listen, you've got the book and the podcast by the same name, The Insider's Edge to Real Estate Investing. Why don't you take 2 minutes to give us just a little bit more context and really just context on your background?
Sure. So my quick story is graduated from Colgate University in 1998. Didn't even know real estate was a thing. I got very lucky. All my friends had investment banking jobs. I went up to the Career Service Center and I saw a job posting to be a sales associate. Again, I didn't even know that commercial real estate was a way to make a living. I later found out that only 2 people applied for the job and I was their second choice. But I still have a great laugh with my founding partners because even though I might have started with low expectations, I went on to become a partner. This was with Massey Knackle Realty Services, was with them for 17 years. We sold that company to Cushman & Wakefield. So went from small regional firm to one of the largest brokerage firms in the world. And then I had 3 great years there, and then had an opportunity to build out the investment sale platform for Avison Young here in New York. I have a team of 36 brokers. We focus on the sale of all asset classes. I know this is obviously a multifamily show, but we do a lot of work with retail, office, land. And in addition to brokerage, investing is really my passion. So at a very early time in my career, started to invest mostly as an LP. And I think when you do that as a broker, you have to do it in the right way, which I really believe I have. And fast forward, had an idea to help provide JV equity for value add deals here in the city for clients. And so raised 2 successful funds. And, I've continued on with my investing career and really hope that my podcast and the upcoming book that McGraw-Hill is releasing shortly will be a great resource for aspiring investors out there, but also veterans who are looking to step up their game.
I appreciate that feedback, man. I love you just sharing a little bit about that background and the fact that you were the second choice for that job application starting out, but you took that, you grew it, was able to sell that brokerage firm and continue to build in the space, both as a broker and an investor. Let's start there because, I think it's interesting when you talk to a broker who is also an investor. And I know some people kind of, quietly talk about it, maybe off the record, don't want people to really know that they're also investing in deals. Talk to me about balancing that, and particularly from an ethical standpoint, because you obviously see a lot of deals and opportunities. Were you holding deals for yourself and cherry picking the best ones, or how did you kind of manage that process? And what are the kind of ethics involved in that whole situation?
John, I love that question, and it's really great that we start off there because it's so important. And I'm sure there's a lot of brokers who listen to your show, and they're seeing their clients making all this money, and they want to get in the game, as they should, right? But there's a right way to do it, and that conflict is such an important piece. And our reputation is everything. And I know you feel the same way, and we're in this for the long run. So the way that you get into these situations and make sure that if you're going to invest along the side, you're doing it in the right way where there's not a conflict. And, disclosure communication is also very important. But I just have a simple rule. I've been doing this for close to 25 years, and it is that I do not invest in deals that I sell, period, as a broker. So doesn't matter if I'm an LP. I mean, just think if, what would a client say if, James, I heard, you told me you went out and ran a process and sold the property for the highest price. And then I found out after the fact that you came in as a partner. Optically, that doesn't look great. But it's, it makes sense. And my day job is definitely as a broker. And that means anytime I get a phone call from an owner who says, James, I'm interested in selling my property. If I'm sitting there trying to decide what hat am I going to wear? Oh, wow, this sounds like a great deal. Maybe I want to buy this, where you start to pick and choose, you said cherry pick the great deals. That's also a recipe for disaster, because then how are owners going to know they're getting a fair shake? Are they dealing with the broker? Are they who are going to represent them? Are they dealing with the buyer? And so the way I invest is if I'm going to go in as a GP and I want to buy at the property level, the owner needs to be represented by another broker. And that way, that owner has their own representation. They're squared away. It's very clear, there's no conflict with my brokerage firm being involved. But more so, I'm investing as an LP. That's where I do most of my investing. Certainly the fund that I was involved with, we're putting out JV equity. So there, we're investing in deals that are already under contract. And even then, again, if it was sold by my company or if I had any involvement, that's something I want to steer clear of.
I think it's great insight and great feedback, especially if anyone is listening to this and you have your license and you're trying to build your brokerage firm up. Make sure that there's very clear separation between the investments that you do and the deals that you represent the seller, because you don't want to have any perception of a conflict, and that just makes it much easier. You talked about investing as an LP, using the fund, or if you do find a deal with the owner, imploring that owner to actually have separate representation so that, again, it's not really a conflict of interest from your standpoint. I just think it's really important to recognize that, because I know some investors get their license specifically to invest and cherry pick deals. I guess what feedback would you give for those individuals, right? Understanding your goal and your initiatives, but for that person who is primarily an investor first, but looks to sell a deal as a broker second, any feedback or tips you'd give that person?
Well, if your focus is to be a full-time investor and you're thinking of doing some brokerage on the side, which is kind of the inverse of what you asked me, I think that's also a slippery slope, right? Because, as a broker, if I'm sending you a listing, John, are you looking at this as a buyer or as a broker? And, what's the story? If I go out of my way to show you an opportunity, and maybe it's even an off-market one, if I don't know that, you are first and foremost a buyer as opposed to a broker who might go take that and go run around with it, that also is, I think you could definitely have some challenges. I think the most important thing, and I talk about this in my book, is cultivating broker relationships. And, I know this is different in every single market, but in most markets, brokers handle the majority of deals, right? Now, whether they're technically on market or off market. So I would suggest to your audience, the best thing you can do if you want great deal flow is really cultivate relationships with brokers, right? Have that dialogue, be connecting with them. And if those brokers think that you're not committed as an investor, or you might actually compete with them as a broker, I think that could jeopardize that.
I think it's great feedback there. You talked about cultivating the broker relationship, and I think this is really important for both newer investors and folks who are looking to break into maybe a new market where maybe you don't have those deep relationships. What are some tips and insights to actually cultivate that relationship, as opposed to just reaching out and saying, hey, my name is John Smith. I'm looking for, these kind of properties. Please send me what you got.
It's a great question. And the first thing I would say is that it is a two-way street. I think even some of my long-term clients, they just expect, and I'll get around to it if I can to make that call and reach out. But look, brokers are busy, right? And you do want to stay top of mind. Now, that doesn't mean call the broker every single day, but you want to make sure that you are staying in touch. And a great way to do that, and I get it, we're in this new day and age where a lot of stuff's done over Zoom, but I think there's no substitute for sitting down with a broker saying, hey, I'm new to the market, I'm looking to get in the game. Can we go out for a quick cup of coffee, right? And I think it is important also, as you're establishing those broker relationships, is to be upfront with what you can deliver and what you can't. If you're new to the game and you haven't bought anything, that broker might say, hey, I appreciate the offer, I appreciate the outreach, but I'm really looking to work with investors who have a track record, right? And that don't take that as them slamming the door in your face. It's just, look, brokers are busy, right? And they want the highest level of certainty to execute a deal. So, they are oftentimes looking for that track record, and that's okay. I talk about in my book, one of the best ways to get started is to find a trusted partner. Because if you do not have that track record, you can't, that's the whole chicken and the egg. You can't just all of a sudden magically have, a 20 deal list to share. But if you partner with a trusted operator, you can leverage their track record. You could say, look, I'm new to the market. I'm out there looking for opportunities. I partnered with, John Smith, and you probably know John. He's owns a lot of properties in your area, but he's got his hands full. He's pretty busy, and I've been sourcing opportunities, and we'd love to see if there's a way to do something. So I'm not saying that's the only way to go about it, because look, there are some brokers also who, maybe they're starting out and they're trying to build their book of business, and they might say, hey, you know what? I appreciate your being upfront with me. Look, maybe we can learn and do this together, and we can share information. But what you don't want to do is overpromise and underdeliver, because brokers will see right through that. If you try to tell me, look, I've been doing this a long time, I'm doing tons of deals, I'm locked and loaded, I'm ready to go. And then you make a bid and I say, okay, well, that's great, let's go to contract. And then you say, whoa, wait a second. I might have to go do this, that. I got to get my investors lined up. That's a surefire way to, not get another deal from that broker in the future.
You just get some great insights, right? First and foremost, meet in person with these brokers, right? Be honest that you're new to the market. Hey, I'd love to connect, put a face to a name. I tell everyone to do the same thing. So I think that's great advice. But also make sure you're optimizing that time. Let them know what you can deliver on, and try to do everything you can to build up your credibility prior to that meeting. If you can't, you've never done a deal before, don't just go in there and let them know that you really don't have any idea how you're going to take it down, right? You're hoping you get it done. Find a trusted partner. Bring in someone who's got that expertise and that ability to close, so that you're walking in with a little bit of credibility, even if it's not based on your own track record. But also just make sure you have all those things lined up. And then your point on working with newer brokers, or a broker who's, maybe early in their career, I think that's a really great point. And I want to say that, when I was starting out, that was one of the things that really helped me was, maybe you're dealing with the brokers at a big company, but it's not the managing partner or the managing director, because those people are dealing with the people who have, the track record and the experience. So they may not have the energy and time to spend with someone who's brand new, but that sales associate, right? Or that associate broker, that advisor, right? That level of an individual is usually newer, maybe a year, 2 years, something like that of experience, but they're building their book of business, and you can grow with them. So that's a great way to reach out and start seeing some traction. And maybe that person can advocate for you on behalf of, any deals or offers you're putting in, better than maybe someone else who's senior or more higher up in the company. So really great tips, actionable insights, how to stand out with brokers if you have limited background or track record in the space. As we talked about, things not to do, you mentioned don't overpromise and underdeliver. What are some other things, mistakes you see newer investors making when they're trying to break into a new market or just trying to get started?
Sure. So one of the big themes throughout my book is that this is a business about the people, right? And having the right people specifically on your team. So when you're looking to transact, you don't want to scramble after you have the deal to try to put your professionals in place, right? So you want to take the time up front to make sure that you have a transactional real estate attorney on standby. And this isn't just the attorney who's done your parents', trust and estate. This is someone if you want to go buy multifamily in Cincinnati, it's got to be an attorney, a transactional commercial real estate attorney who has done other multifamily deals in your market. And not only because the obvious, you want them to properly represent you. They know what's market, what to look for, but a great attorney can also introduce you to a lot of opportunities, right? And so you want to make sure you have that attorney. You want to make sure that you're working with a good investment sale broker, a mortgage broker. If you're going to do work, you want a contractor who's reliable and you've checked out references to give you a sense of what it's going to cost to reposition the property, a managing agent. So again, these types of relationships take time to cultivate, right? Whereas deals can happen very quickly. So what you don't want to do is find this incredible opportunity and then try to scramble to try to put your deal team together. So I would certainly say that is something that if you take the time up front, you can definitely avoid having those challenges down the stretch.
That's great insight right there, James. And one point I'd add to that is you also want to make sure you understand the process, because if you are looking at a different market, sometimes that changes. And I used to live in Chicago, and in Chicago, the real estate agent really led that process on the buy side. But in Ohio, when I moved here to Cincinnati in my first Ohio deal, it was actually the title company. So I was looking at my agent like, hey, man, or I'm sorry, not the agent, the attorney. So in Chicago, the attorney kind of handles and drives that process. But in Cincinnati and Ohio, it's really more the title company. So I was looking at my attorney like, hey, man, like, where are we at? Where are things going? And he was just shrugging his shoulders. And I'm like, listen, like, what am I missing here? And finally, my agent's like, oh, hey, I realized you maybe don't really understand how it works here. The title company actually drives, all of the timelines and all that kind of stuff here. It's not the agent. So just make sure you understand that, because that role, whether whoever's driving, you want to make sure they understand the deadlines, the timelines, all the stuff that needs to happen, all the documents that need to be procured. And that's going to be your main contact. And that may be more important than maybe another role on the team. So just really important to understand some of those things if you are going into a new market as well.
It's a great point.
Yeah. All right. So, James, you mentioned the book, right? And the book is getting ready to get released here. What sparked you to write this book, and what can listeners get if they pick this up?
Right. So the impetus for this book was really right after COVID, sitting at home, had free time for, the first time in my 20 plus year career. And, we didn't know if we were going to be in this for days, weeks, months. And so the first thing I did was launch a podcast. I know you had figured this out a lot longer ago than I had, but I found it as an incredible way, and still today, to always be learning, right? And it's such a great way to have a conversation, get to know people on a deeper level. And so after I'd done, a year of podcasts, it said, look, this is really some great information that I'd love to share. And so I started working on a book and it's still about 3/4 done. And I plan to finish it as ultimately my second book. But the working title of that was going to be Real Estate Investing, The Keys to Success, where we talk about some of these legends in the business, what made them successful. And I found a lot of it was really kind of the soft skills, right? And so very inspirational and learning from these, legends in the business. But I realized the book didn't really tell you how to do it though, right? It gave you some inspiration, but it didn't give you kind of from start to finish. So I said, look, I got to write the how-to book. And so, fortunately, I've got a lot of good friends who including Ryan Serhant, who's the top residential broker here in New York. He had written 2 books. And I said, Ryan, how do we do this? And helped get an agent, and made this incredible introduction to McGraw-Hill, who's going to be publishing the book, and worked with a writing partner, Rachel Hartman, who is phenomenal. And that's been the process over the last 2 years. So I'm super excited for the release, and my hope is just that it's helpful in giving actionable information to readers out there. And again, whether it's someone just looking to get into the business, or maybe it's someone who's thinking about getting into going off and getting their master's degree, or maybe it's a veteran who says, look, I got to step up my game. And so I'm really excited to hear the reception from this book.
The book is The Insider's Edge to Real Estate Investing. And real estate investing can be, pretty broad, right? Once you kind of get into it. So who is this for? I mean, is this for kind of, the single family house flipper? Is this for the guys investing in retail and office buildings? Like, who gets the most benefit out of this book?
Great question. And, I think there is a lot out there for the, fix it, flip it, wholesaling and, or even kind of buying in to that four family where it's a live plus invest. And I do reference in the book. I mean, that's how I got my investing start is I bought a 3-family and lived in one of the units. And I learned a lot just by owning, operating, fixing it up. But no, this book is really looking at more complex commercial real estate transactions and anywhere where you're going to go out and potentially raise capital, reposition multiple units. It really speaks to those types of investments. So whether you're thinking of becoming the general partner, and again, if this is the first time that you're doing this, my advice is find that partner, become a co-GP so you can work on the deal together. Or if you're an LP and you want to understand the investment, I think this book is very helpful to have you understand the mindset of the investor so you can ask the right questions. One of the things I talk about in the book, which is one of the most important questions to ask to find out if it's a great opportunity, is seller's motivation, right? And so the book talks about, on one end of the spectrum, you have estate sales, you have partnership disputes, distress. Those are motivated sellers. On the other hand, you've got discretionary sellers who say, hey, if I can get this price, I'll sell. So even if you are not the general partner taking down that deal, but you have an operator asking you to invest money passively, a great first question is, hey, tell me a little bit of the story of the deal. How did you find out about this? Did you, was this a marketed deal? What's the seller's profile? How do you know you got a great opportunity? And, you ask that question, the sponsor might be, wow, okay, this person knows what they're doing. They're asking the right questions. And that can kind of, even if your goal is just to put together a portfolio of LP positions, kind of the right questions. And I think also, hey, is this the right sponsor for me to invest with? Because you're seeing all the things that a sponsor should be doing. Well, hey, who's your transactional attorney? Tell me about, your track record, what you've done. So I'm hoping that anyone who's looking to invest in a really a commercial, which to me is like 5+ units, a larger multifamily deal, retail, I talk a little bit about office, development. Although, I talk about for kind of first-time investors, I would stick to the multifamily mixed use, office, especially in this day and age. There's a whole host of reasons why you might want to be careful there. But certainly development, how much risk there is in going ground up. Although I do cover it and talk about, in some cases, maybe you're buying a multifamily deal, but I talk about, are there air rights? Is there the ability to improve on that? So even knowing enough about that to ask the right questions, I think it's going to be helpful to the reader.
I love the fact that you talked about the level of complexities that you cover in the book and, understanding the questions to ask. And one being, how did you come across this deal, or what's the story here? Why is the seller selling? And I think that's a great question. It's one that, all of our investors and all of our, students, they understand, because we always push them to ask those questions as well, because for me, it helps me even understand before I start underwriting a deal. I want to know the answer to that question, because one, you're not always going to get the truth when you're talking to a seller or broker, right? You're not going to get the fundamental truth. Sometimes they're going to just tell you whatever they need to tell you. But when you start underwriting and you start understanding your business plan, you kind of have to go in with the hypothesis, right? It's like, okay, these owners have had it for 20 years. Maybe they're managing it in a more easy way for them because they've managed it for 20 years. They've made their money. They don't need to squeeze out every dollar of profit. They don't need to push rents every year. So in theory, I should be able to increase rents, right? So I'm starting to come in and put together a theory in my head with what the opportunity is. And then I confirm that. So understanding that story and then digging into the numbers, it needs to mesh. And if it doesn't mesh, I know something's wrong and someone's not telling the truth somewhere, right? So the numbers don't lie, but you also have to understand what are the inputs in the numbers and marry that story up, because, everyone will tell you what you can do to it. And sure, there's upside potential, but how much? that's always a little bit debatable. So you have to really understand that story and start pulling it all together from that standpoint. And the other thing I would say is, if you're an LP, to the point you made, you want to understand the story, and then that should flow very nicely into the business plan and what the exit strategy is going to be. So you don't want to hear a story where, someone's selling it because of whatever reason, and we're going to do X, Y, Z, but it doesn't tie off into the reason that person is selling, right? Maybe they bought it, maybe they're a syndicator and they bought it with variable debt, and now they need to sell because they're not getting the rents they thought they were going to get. But we're going to be able to get those rents, right? It's like, well, wait a minute. If they couldn't get those rents, what makes you think you can get those rents, right? Like, unless there's something different, like now you kind of know the areas to really push and where there may be some risk in the deal, or maybe where, there's a little bit of a gap. So just think understanding those background stories are really important to shed some light on where the opportunities could be, but also where the potential pitfalls could be.
Yeah, John, I'm so glad you brought that up. And now I'm hoping, I mean, it's the book's already off the press, so I'm hoping that I covered some of that as well. But, clearly knowing the seller's motivation can indicate how much flexibility there's going to be in a negotiation. Do they have to sell? But also as it impacts your business plan. I really like that, because that mom and pop owner who didn't push rents or didn't necessarily do the proper renovations, that's where you see a lot of opportunity as well, because of course, the price, you can't change the price of where you bought a deal, but, which is critical to the success, but then also making sure that you can really implement the business plan. So those are great points to cover as well.
Yeah. And the last thing I'll say on that point is also your terms. So if you understand why someone's looking to sell, certainly price is always going to be a big factor, but maybe there are other terms that you can offer that actually address that seller's needs, particularly if you have someone who's ready to retire and cash out. If you can quickly take over the asset, or if you can, really demonstrate a commitment to closing on the asset, hard money or shorter, time frame to close. Those things could be looked at with some upside, and that could be really appealing to a seller if they know that you're committed to close and you're demonstrating that desire. So just understanding that thing allows you to actually take some of the other terms of the deal and maybe position you to be successful. For folks who want to learn more.
Sorry,
John, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I just want to add one thing, because that point of bringing the right terms to the seller, I think something that we're all going to start seeing a lot more of is seller financing. And again, I've been doing this for 25 years. And when I first started, you'd hear about these seller financing deals that were done in the past, and then debt has been so readily available and, more importantly, cheap, that it didn't make sense for sellers to take back paper, because if the banks were lending at 3-4%, our clients were saying, hey, not that I wouldn't occasionally get a seller financing request, but we kind of laughed about it, because we were thinking, hey, how real is this buyer if they're asking for seller financing? But now, with everything that's going on, rates going up. So first of all, the days of borrowing at 3 or 4% are gone. So, the fact that it might cost you high 5-6% from a conventional lender, to be able to offer that now to a seller, they might say, my plan was to just put this in, T-bills, the bond market, wherever. That might be somewhat appealing. But the other challenge today is getting leverage, right? We have cash flowing deals here in New York City. And, lenders are so conservative with rates going up as well, that debt service coverage ratio. In some cases, they can only give 50% loan to value. So, it could be another opportunity where, maybe you give a seller, 6-7%, and then maybe you get 65-70% leverage. So again, understanding that seller's mindset. And if they're just saying, hey, I'm going to just cash out, I don't want to manage anymore, that might also be the impetus for have a conversation that could be a real win-win.
That's a great insight right there. James, you've got a lot of great insights on this show. You've got your own podcast and your book coming out. Both are titled The Insider's Edge to Real Estate Investing. We'll make sure we put a link to James's book and podcast in the show notes. And you can also reach out to him. His handle is at James Nelson NYC. And then his website is jamesnelson.com. With that said, we're going to move on to our round of insights. Ready?
Yes.
All right, give me a failure or an apparent failure that set you up for greater success.
Oh, great question. I think one of the first incredible opportunities I saw, I just tried to keep it for myself because I didn't want anyone to find out about the deal. And so I couldn't raise the money on my own. I couldn't figure it out. I could have gone to that trusted partner, right? I wish I had my own book 20 years ago to have taken down that incredible opportunity. So yeah, bring in help. Don't try to just keep things to yourself. You got to have that abundance mentality.
We've heard it over and over and over, but this is a team sport. It's about relationships. Don't try to do it all by yourself. So great insight right there. All right, give me a digital or mobile resource you recommend for your business.
You know, a plug for Reonomy. I use the tool every single day. While you're looking at properties, if you don't know the basic information on the property as well as the debt, I think you're not leveraging everything that exists out there today. I mean, obviously for larger commercial properties, use CoStar, but whatever the property database is, there's so much information out there with both building and owner information. You got to make sure that you leverage it.
All right, besides your own, give me the book you've recommended or gifted the most in the last year.
Wow. They're great questions. So I would say, so from a brokerage standpoint, for the brokers out there, I do a lot of work with Rod Santamassimo, the Massimo Group, brokers who dominate, teams built to dominate. But he wrote a recent book called Knowing Isn't Doing that doesn't just apply to brokers. It applies to anyone, really. And it's certainly appropriate for this show as well, because hopefully you've taken some notes down. You've got 5-10 great ideas that you got from the show, but it's just that. It's an idea. So Knowing Isn't Doing. Rod talks about how important it is to make those ideas actionable, which really ties into the James Clear Atomic Habits. And that's, we just got through with our year-end reviews for the team, and we say, hey, goals are great, but what's the habit? What are you going to do on a daily, weekly basis to actually make those goals happen? So I think if you kind of tee those two up together, I think that's really a recipe for success.
Great options right there. Knowing Isn't Doing. We had Rod on the show a little while back, so we'll make sure we link to that episode as well as Atomic Habits by James Clear. Great books right there. All right. Give me your number one insight for multifamily investing.
Again, it's all about the people. I think about the first podcast episode I ever did, and I interviewed Bruce Ratner, who has developed over 50 properties in New York City, millions and millions of square feet. He built Barclays Arena, part owner of the Nets. And I kept asking Bruce throughout the show, what was the key to your success? And he just said, I had great people. I had a great team. And it wasn't until I went back and re-listened to the episode and counted, but he used the word people or team over 50 times in an hour-long episode, right? And another one of my favorite episodes from early on was with Rick Clark. Rick Clark was CEO of Brookfield, largest property owner in the world, right? And when Rick joined, this goes back probably 30 plus years ago, he was their first employee in New York. So it was a Canadian company. He opens the New York office, and I'm interviewing Rick, and I said, Rick, since you've been there and now as CEO, and he kind of worked himself up in the ranks, you guys are in every country. How did you do it? And I kept waiting for him to say, well, strong leadership, and this is what I did, and this was the vision. I don't even think he used the word I, in the interview. It was all about the right people and the right team.
What's a daily habit that helps you stay focused on your goals?
I think it's just consistency and repetition. So, look, this is, if you've been doing this long enough, you know that there are cycles in the market, but I don't think that should change your habits and what you're doing. Okay. Maybe you need to pivot and you need to think about different ways to do your business, but I'll give you a quick example. Going back from 2007 to 2009, so peak market into the depths of the financial crisis, building sales in New York City went down 90%, 90, as did my brokerage income. And I just kept showing up in 2009. I didn't even know what I was doing because, everyone was on the sidelines, right? But I just kept looking for information. Where's the next opportunity going to be? Meanwhile, I heard a lot of my competitors said, I'm taking the year off. I'm going to go travel Europe. And then all of a sudden it changed. And even though I had never sold a loan before in my life, by the time 2010 rolled around, almost every single major bank out there, we ended up representing, selling loans. And 2010 happened to be one of my best years ever after that. So, looking at COVID, looking at what we're going through right now with interest rates going up, I don't think it might be as drastic as, all-time low, bouncing back up. But the point is that, every morning I'm getting up at the same time, I'm getting on the train, I'm doing my research, and I think that's really important, is I do believe whether you're investing, you're brokering, we're in the information business, right? So that is what is going to help you, is one of my favorite quotes, the Wayne Gretzky, skate to where the puck is going. Like, that's what's going to help inform you. But it starts with that consistency. You can't just be a great broker, a great investor for a couple months, do a deal, and then take the rest of the year off. That just doesn't work.
I love that. And that's just great insight and advice. And to your point, you want to show up, but show up every day. And we talk about being patiently aggressive, right? So it's patient with the results, but aggressive with the actions to make sure you're showing up every day, doing the things you're supposed to be doing, and then let the results kind of handle themselves. Obviously, getting feedback and tweaking and whatnot, but you want to just keep showing up, because that's 80% of success is literally just showing up. If you show up every day, most people quit before they get the results they're looking for. So just show up, commit to it, and that's going to be the lion's share of the results that you're looking for. All right, let's lighten the mood, man. You gave us some great information, but you are a New York guy. You got to give us the best place or your favorite place to grab a bite to eat.
Oh, wow. Gosh, so many. I don't live in the city anymore, but we used to live down in Greenwich Village, and like there's so many spots down there. But it's hard to just pick one, and I want to be fair, but like I think even just like strolling down Bleecker Street, on any given night, I mean, there's just so much out there. But I mean, if you're a real foodie, I mean, there's so much going on right now. John George opened up this restaurant down in the South Street Seaport where you're overlooking the East River. I haven't made it yet, but there's supposedly a new phenomenal restaurant in One Vanderbilt. So if you are looking for the touristy thing, and I will say the new observation tower they opened at One Vanderbilt called the Summit is really cool. Even as a New Yorker, I went up there and I was pretty blown away with what they've done, not to mention the views up there. So
I love it, man. Lots of good options there. We'll make sure we link to a couple of those on our show notes here. But I want to just say thank you, James, for being a great guest today. A couple of big insights I'm taking away, and I hope our listeners took away. One, when you want to break into this industry or grow and scale, make sure that you are being transparent, right? If you are looking to talk to brokers and build relationships there, be transparent about where you're at, but also build the credibility. Take the time to kind of anticipate the feedback or the issues you might face and try to address some of those early on in the process so that you can come to them as a credible buyer. Also, if you're going to invest and you're a broker, make sure you're being transparent and clear on, kind of that separation so you don't have those conflict of interest with the deals that you're looking to invest in, along with the deals you're trying to represent on the sales side. So make sure you understand that and protect yourself and operate with great ethics in mind. And then lastly, understanding just the different things that you can do to stand out, build teams, and position yourself for success, understanding and asking the right questions. Why is this seller selling? What's the backstory? All those kind of things are going to help you be better positioned to understand what business plan you want to create and whether or not a deal is going to make sense for you. Again, if you want to learn more and get that the book or check out the podcast, The Insider's Edge to Real Estate Investing, you can check out James at jamesnelson.com or follow him on social media at JamesNelsonNYC. James, thanks again for being a great guest. We look forward to staying in touch and talking to you again soon.
John, thank you so much, and best of luck to you and your audience.